The Virginia governor and the city of Charlottesville declaring a state of emergency ahead of the anniversary of last year's deadly Unite the Right rally, citing concerns over planned demonstrations of hate. National Guard units will be deployed for additional security. Of course, it was 1 year ago that torch-carrying neo-Nazi racists gathered there, chanting racist slogans and terrifying people. 32-year-old Heather Heyer was killed, and dozens were injured by a man who intentionally drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters. And in the aftermath, these comments from the president.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did.
So many business leaders left President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum and Manufacturing Advisory Council. The groups of business leaders were meant to serve as an informal advisory council to collaborate with the administration. But the president was initially unfazed, saying, for every CEO that drops out of the Manufacturing Council, I have many to take their place. Grandstanders should not have gone on. Jobs. Well, as the blowback grew, the vast majority of CEOs on the panel said that they were going to call it quits if it was not disbanded. And President Trump pulled the old "I'm breaking up with you before you leave me" routine, tweeting this. Rather than putting pressure on the business people of the Manufacturing Council and Strategy and Policy Forum, I am ending both. Thank you all. Well, and that was it for the councils. So it was interesting to see who the president dined with last night. Some of those very same people who so admirably took a stand last year were at Bedminster Golf Club with the president days before the anniversary of that ugly incident that the president could not unilaterally disavow. So take the CEO of Johnson & Johnson, Alex Gorski. Last August, he said this. He said, the president's most recent statements equating those who are motivated by race-based hate with those who stand up against hatred is unacceptable and has changed our decision to participate in the White House Manufacturing Advisory Council. That's what he said then. And then PepsiCo's CEO, Indra Nooyi, who was reportedly instrumental getting other council members to stand united against the president, tweeted 1 year ago this, that she was heartbroken by the violence at the white nationalist rally. And in the wake of the racist violence, Mark Weinberger, the CEO of accounting giant Ernst & Young, said bigotry and hatred have no place in our society. I am deeply saddened and disturbed by the tragic, deplorable acts that took place in Charlottesville. So we at CNN and our colleagues at CNBC have reached out to ask for a comment from these executives on last night's dinner. Ernst & Young was the only one to get back to us, saying, no comment. Perhaps they believe that over the past year, President Trump has showed some evolution of thought and contrition about what happened in Charlottesville, though I don't think we have seen much evidence of that at all. They may feel that attending this dinner now, a year later, is the right thing to do for their companies, regardless of their personal feelings about Charlottesville at the time. The White House says that last night's dinner at Bedminster was a chance for the president to hear from a number of business leaders. But I wonder what his takeaway was. We'll talk more about that when we come back. And we're back. President Trump dining with some of the biggest names in corporate America nearly a year after many of them publicly broke with him over comments following the deadly violence in Charlottesville. So let's discuss now. CNN political commentators Mark Lamont Hill and Margaret Hoover, both here. Also with Rob Astorino, a former Republican candidate for governor in New York. Welcome, everyone. It's good to have you all around the table here. So last year, some of these CEOs, many of them were like cutting ties with this White House council, with the White House. What a difference a year makes.
Yeah, it goes to show you politicians and CEOs don't have feelings, they have interests. And it was in their best interest to run away from Donald Trump. It's bad for business to stand next to somebody who supports or seems to be supporting white supremacy. So they ran away. Everyone knew it was a bad idea to support that march except Donald Trump. And now, a year later, they understand it's in their best interest to get close to him again, and so they're doing it.
If they're back at the table, then what's the point? What was the point of all that outrage?
Well, I do think there's value in saying I can't be on your council
Right.
if you're saying something this horrific.
Right.
That doesn't mean I can't do business with you. It doesn't mean we can't negotiate. That's the best case scenario. A more cynical read, which is also my read, is that they ran away because it was bad for business, but nod, wink, wink, we're still with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, the argument, right? The argument is always if you're not at the table, you can't influence the policies. And apparently, I mean, Donald Trump even waved over one of his staffers and said, go write up an executive order on immigration. These guys want high-skilled immigration here, right? So I don't know what comes of that. Maybe something, maybe nothing. But you're not going to have that conversation with the President of the United States if you don't show up for dinner.
So Charlottesville was declared a state of emergency. It's a 1-year anniversary. Heather Heyer died. There's so much indignation around this. Do you think people have moved on? How could they have moved on?
I don't think anybody has moved on from what the president said or what happened there, or I mean that was absolutely equating neo-Nazis, and what happened on it was morally unconscionable, and I don't think anybody's distancing themselves from those words that were morally unconscionable. But Mark's exactly right. They've got shareholder interests. They have other competing interests at play, and the president, after he said those things, it's a year has gone by, and he hasn't. He's continued to make all sorts of other problems for himself, and they have other interests.
What do you think?
She's right. I think Margaret's right, and Mark on this one, because the CEOs like Indra Nooyi, who I know from Westchester, that's where PepsiCo's world headquarters is. Everything is global now, right? So PepsiCo is all over the world, and trade and sanctions have an effect on PepsiCo and all those CEOs. So if they were to not sit down with the president and take that opportunity, they would be a dereliction of their duty as the CEO of a major company, and their number one responsibility is to their company and to their shareholders. So it's dangerous. It is dangerous, by the way, when companies go out of their zone of what they're supposed to be doing and make public policy statements or take these kind of positions, because that can tick off half the country.
Do you think these CEOs are effectively telling him that there are no consequences to what you say or your actions at all?
No, I think they made those statements by folding the council and making those statements at the time. I think that had an effect. But also, when they're getting invited to sit down with the president, they have to do that. I don't care who the president is, and I don't care what their personal.
Do you have to go to Bedminster, though?
No. See, that's the thing.
That's
You don't
the
have
thing.
to
You
go.
don't have to go. You don't
This
have to go
isn't just
anywhere.
going. You went to the golf club, right? It wasn't like they went to the
but
White
if
House.
they were at Martha's Vineyard,
Yeah, it
they go
doesn't
to
matter.
Martha's Vineyard.
Right.
Wherever the president is summering, they go to you go when the president invites you, you go to the president's table, or you don't. It's not because it's so.
No, but I think
but if
optics
that's
matter.
the calculation, if your calculation is you're looking out for shareholders' interests, and by the way, what was extraordinary about Charlottesville is how many CEOs were going to take a public stand about it. I mean, CNBC just put a poll out 2 days ago saying that basically there is a 70% chance there will be a backlash on brand reputation if you make a statement either affirmatively or negatively about Donald Trump.
Well, that's why I said, why do you have to go to
Either way,
Bedminster?
the idea.
And why would you have to go to Bedminster to do it? Because you have to weigh, right?
That's what I'm saying.
You have to weigh one against the other,
And
which
the
is the same
optics of
thing
it
with the
matter, too.
pastors.
Right. The
And think
optics
about
of it
that.
matter.
Hold on, before you
Okay.
jump in. You said they don't have to go, and we both looked at you and said no, because if you look at the athletes, many of them didn't want to go to this White House, and there have been other people who didn't go to other White Houses. Yeah.
I mean, there are celebrities who didn't go, who I think were right not to go.
Yeah.
But I think if you go, you have to go under your terms and your conditions. And I think because they walked away from him, because he's the one in a vulnerable position right now, you're in a position of strength where you can dictate the terms of the engagement. If I'm the CEO of a corporation, I say, look, Mr. Trump, I'll meet with you, but I'm not going to make it look like we're old buddies who had a under the table deal the whole time. I'm not going to hang out at the golf club like we're friends. We'll meet at the White House. We'll meet somewhere else where it looks like we're talking brass tacks. We're going straight to business. I'm not going to look like we're hanging out, because I think that's actually bad for business. I think being Donald Trump's friend right now is generally bad for business.
It is the summer White House, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Oval Office is under construction. That's where they're having their meetings. That's where they're running the country's business. So you think it's really not the same as the White House?
Margaret,
I think the optics-
hold on. It is a private Trump property. It's not like they were at Camp David.
Okay.
It's
Okay,
a private
they're
Trump
summering.
That's one
property.
thing. I am not in favor of the president driving business and
Okay.
reputation and brand marketing to his personal businesses while he's in the White House. I have a
But
massive
there's that
problem with
too.
that.
They
Right.
didn't just
There's
get
the
off-
other conflict. Yeah.
They didn't just get off the 18th hole. I mean, they were invited there in the conference room or the dining room, all around a big table to have a discussion. And I think the setting is irrelevant. The fact that they're meeting with the president is very important to their companies and to their shareholders. And you always should have that dialogue. When President Obama or President Bush or President Clinton, when they met with CEOs, not every one of those CEOs agreed with the president, but of course they were going to meet with him because they had an interest that they needed to take to the table and talk to the president about.
That's fascinating, though. I feel like when it's people we like, we say, oh, well, you have to meet with them even if we disagree. If it's people we don't like, we say, oh, you can't dignify them with your appearance. I think both
he's
parties
the
do
president.
it. No, well, there are lots of people. Putin's president. I mean, lots of presidents. And some people say we should meet with. Some people say you shouldn't meet with. My point is just to say I think both parties do it. I think we have to have a somewhat consistent standard here about what qualifies as a legitimate meeting and what does not. I don't have a problem necessarily with those CEOs meeting with them. Again, for me, optics matter. And to say I disagree with you on that one point, which is I think the setting does matter. I think the setting always matters. If they met in Charlottesville, it would be a very different narrative than if they met in D.C. I mean, it matters. And I think now these CEOs, partly because of this conversation, are going to have to go back and explain what they were meeting about, why they were meeting. And yeah, they weren't on the 18th hole, but I think that's but appearance matters. It feels like they were on the 18th hole.
To exactly your point, they all leaked. Right, there were massive stories from all these different CEOs.
And they said they did talk
talked
about their
trade. They talked about
immigration.
immigration.
Yeah,
right.
So
about their
they had to
thing.
go back.
Yeah.
All of the stories that are written about it, like, well, what they got out of it,
Yeah.
why'd they do it. They weren't just chumming it up. They had business.
But also, you know,
You're
and
still dressed up at Bedminster, a private property of the president, and you look like you're. If you meet someone on their turf in a private setting, it looks like you're being chummy or cozy with them.
no, but the private setting
It
is the
doesn't
White
matter
House.
if
That's his turf
you
too.
support them or not.
That's his turf.
That's the people's turf.
Well, yes, but that's where the president.
A Trump property feels a little less public.
All right.